The corner of Grant Avenue in Columbus had become Sofia's stage, though she'd never chosen it with any particular intention. It was simply where she'd ended up one evening 6 months ago, exhausted from walking the unfamiliar streets of San Francisco's North Beach, her white cane tapping against sidewalk cracks and her violin case heavy in her free hand. She'd sat down on the concrete, her back against the brick wall of a shuttered bakery, and had played until her fingers ached and a small collection of bills and coins had accumulated in the open case at her feet. The next night, she'd returned. And the night after that, until the corner had become hers in the way that certain spaces belong to certain people in cities. An unspoken claim, recognized by other street performers and the regular pedestrians who passed by on their way to the restaurants and bars that lined the street. Sofia didn't need to see the neighborhood to know it. She'd learned it through sound and scent and the particular quality of the air as it moved between buildings. The Italian restaurant 2 doors down, where garlic and basil and fresh bread created an olfactory symphony that made her stomach growl on slow nights when her earnings weren't enough for a proper meal. The jazz club across the street, where music leaked through the walls and mingled with her own violin melodies. The flower shop next to the bakery, where roses and lilies left their perfume on the evening breeze. Tonight the air was cool and damp, carrying the salt and fog smell that meant the marine layer was rolling in from the bay. Sofia had arrived at her corner just after sunset, navigating the familiar route from her studio apartment 6 blocks away, counting the intersections and listening for the audio signals at each crosswalk. She'd set up her equipment with practiced efficiency, the small amplifier that helped her violin carry over the street noise, the card reader that allowed digital tips, the laminated sign that read, Sofia Martinez, classical and contemporary violin, in raised letters she could trace with her fingers to ensure it faced the right direction. She'd been blind since she was 12, the result of a car accident that had taken her sight and her parents in one terrible moment. The violin had come later, during her time in the group home, when a music teacher had pressed the instrument into her hands and told her that she could still create beauty even if she couldn't see it. Sofia had discovered that music made sense in a way the world no longer did, that the precise relationship between bow pressure and string tension, between finger placement and resulting pitch, was something she could master through touch and sound and muscle memory. She'd been playing for about an hour, working through her usual repertoire, Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, some Ennio Morricone film scores, a few jazz standards that tourists seemed to enjoy, when she felt the shift in the atmosphere around her corner. Someone had stopped to listen. Sofia was attuned to the presence of her audience in ways that sighted people might not understand. She could feel the difference between someone pausing for a few seconds and someone settling in to truly listen. She could sense the attention, the way it changed the quality of the space around her, created a subtle pressure against her awareness. This listener felt different from the usual tourists and neighborhood regulars. There was a weight to their presence, a stillness that suggested complete focus. Most people who stopped to listen were in motion even as they stood, shifting their weight, checking their phones, dividing their attention between her music and the dozens of other stimuli competing for their notice. This person was absolutely still. Sofia continued playing, finishing the piece she'd started, a melancholic arrangement of Moon River that always earned good tips. When the last note faded, she heard the expected sound of coins dropping into her case, but also something else. The rustle of folded paper currency, several bills, from the sound of it. "Thank you," she said, her voice directed toward where she sensed the listener standing. She'd trained herself to track people's locations by the small sounds they made. Breathing, the creak of leather shoes, the faint electronic hum of a phone. The listener didn't respond immediately. Sofia waited, her bow resting against the violin strings, her head tilted slightly in a listening posture that had become habitual over the years. "Do you take requests?" The voice was male, deep and cultured, with an accent that suggested Italian origins though the English was flawless. "Sometimes," Sofia said carefully. "Depends on the song. Puccini. O mio babbino caro." Sofia felt something shift in her chest. It was an unusual request for a street corner performance. The Ocharia was typically sung, not played on violin, and it required a delicate touch to capture the emotional nuance without the lyrics to carry the meaning. But she knew it well. It had been one of her mother's favorites. "Els. I can play that," she said. She positioned the violin, adjusting her grip slightly, and began. Els. The opening notes were soft, almost hesitant, like a question being asked. She let the melody build gradually, her bow moving in long, smooth strokes that drew out the sweetness and longing embedded in Puccini's composition. She played it the way her mother would have sung it, with a kind of desperate tenderness, a plea from daughter to father, a promise that love would prevail over all obstacles. When she finished, the silence that followed felt thick with emotion. Sofia could hear the listener breathing, a slow exhale that sounded almost like pain. "Where did you learn to play like that?" the man asked, and there was something raw in his voice that hadn't been there before. "A teacher at the group home where I grew up," Sofia said. "After my parents died, she told me music could be a home when you don't have one." More silence. Sofia waited, wondering if the listener would leave now, would disappear back into the flow of pedestrian traffic like most of her audience did. Instead, she heard footsteps, the sound of expensive leather shoes moving closer, and then the slight displacement of air that told her someone was crouching down near her. "My mother loved that song," the man said quietly. "She died 3 years ago. I haven't heard it since her funeral." Sofia absorbed this information, processing the grief she could hear beneath his controlled tone. "I'm sorry," she said. "Losing a parent is..." She paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound trite. "It changes everything." "Yes." The word was barely audible. "Princess. How did you know to play it exactly that way, with that particular phrasing?" Sofia frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "The tempo changes, the emphasis on certain notes. It's exactly how she used to sing it. Exactly." A chill ran down Sofia's spine. She'd played the Ashuria dozens of times over the years. But tonight she'd played it differently, she realized. She'd felt guided by some instinct she couldn't name, had made choices with the bow and her finger placement that she couldn't entirely explain. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Sometimes the music just comes out a certain way. I don't always control it consciously." She heard the man stand, the sound of fabric rustling as he straightened. "What's your name?" "Sofia Martinez." "Sofia." He repeated it, as if testing the weight of it. "I'm Luca Andretti." The name resonated in Sofia's memory, though she couldn't immediately place why. It was distinctive, memorable, Italian. And there was something in the way he said it that suggested it should mean something to her. "It's nice to meet you, Luca," she said, because it seemed like the appropriate response. "I'd like to hire you," Luca said abruptly, "to play at a private event. Would you be interested?" Sofia's fingers tightened around her violin's neck. Private events could be lucrative, but they also meant navigating unfamiliar spaces, dealing with logistics that were complicated when you couldn't see. She'd done a few over the years, a wedding, a couple of anniversary parties, but she'd always been wary, always worried about the things that could go wrong. "What kind of event?" she asked. "A memorial. For my mother. It's the anniversary of her death next week, and I'm gathering close friends and family. I'd like you to play that piece, and whatever else you think would be appropriate." Sofia considered. Memorial services were emotionally charged, intimate gatherings. Well, playing for them required sensitivity and skill, but they were also deeply meaningful work. Where would it be? "My home, in Pacific Heights." "Oh, I'll send a car for you. Make sure you have everything you need. You'll be well compensated for your time." Pacific Heights. One of the wealthiest neighborhoods in San Francisco, where houses sold for tens of millions, and the views stretched across the bay to Marin. Sofia had never been there, had no mental map of its streets and geography. "I'd need to know the space," she said. "The acoustics, the layout. I don't perform well in environments I don't understand." "Of course, we can arrange for you to visit beforehand. Get familiar with the room." Luca paused. "I should tell you, my family and we value privacy, discretion. This memorial will be small, but the guests are influential. I need to know you can be trusted to be professional, to not share details about what you see or hear." What you see. The phrase was automatic, probably meaningless, but it struck Sofia as ironic. She almost laughed. "I can promise you discretion," she said. "I'm not exactly in a position to share visual details about anything." "No, of course not. I didn't mean." Luca stopped, and Sofia heard something that might have been embarrassment or frustration in his voice. I apologize. That was thoughtless. It's fine. People say, see you later, to me all the time. Language isn't always literal. Sofia shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how long she'd been sitting on the cold concrete, how the dampness was seeping through her jeans. Can I think about it? I'd need to know more details. Time, duration, payment. Yes, of course. She heard him moving, the sound of a wallet opening, and then he was pressing something into her free hand. A business card, thick and expensive, with embossed lettering she could feel under her fingertips. My number. Call me tomorrow if you're interested. I'll arrange everything. Tard. Sofia tucked the card into her jacket pocket. Thank you for the request. And for listening. Thank you for the music. Luca's voice had softened again, returned to that raw quality it had held after she'd played the Puccini. It meant more than you know. She heard him walk away, his footsteps steady and purposeful, fading into the ambient noise of the street. Sofia sat with her violin resting across her lap, processing the encounter. There had been something unusual about Luca Andretti, something beyond his grief and his unexpected request. A quality of carefully contained power, of authority held in check. She pulled out the business card and ran her fingers over the raised letters. They spelled out, Luca Andretti, Private Enterprises. Below that, a phone number. Nothing else. The kind of card that communicated wealth and influence through its very minimalism. Sofia pulled out her phone and activated the voice assistant. Search Luca Andretti, San Francisco. The phone's synthesized voice began reading search results, and with each sentence, Sofia felt her heart rate increase. Hello. Luca Andretti. Alleged head of one of the city's most powerful organized crime families. Suspected involvement in everything from construction contracts to port operations to high-end gambling. Never convicted of anything, always operating just on the legal side of the line, but mentioned frequently in investigative journalism pieces about the intersection of legitimate business and organized crime in the Bay Area. Sofia closed her eyes, a meaningless gesture but an old habit, and tried to process what she'd just learned. The man who'd been moved to tears by her performance of his mother's favorite aria was apparently a crime boss. The private event he wanted to hire her for was a memorial that would be attended by influential people who probably included other members of the organized crime community. She should decline. She should call him tomorrow and politely say that she wasn't available, that she appreciated the offer but couldn't accept. Getting involved with someone like Luca Andretti was the definition of poor judgment. She'd worked too hard to build her small, stable life in San Francisco to risk it by associating with dangerous people. But even as she thought it, Sofia remembered the grief in his voice, the way he'd said, "It's exactly how she used to sing it." She remembered the sound of his breathing after the final note, the emotion he hadn't been able to hide. Whatever else Luca Andretti might be, he was also a son who missed his mother. And Sofia, who had lost her own parents, understood that particular species of grief with an intimacy that most people never acquired. She packed up her equipment slowly, counting the bills and coins in her case by touch. A good night, made better by Luca's generous tip. She collapsed her amplifier, secured her violin in its case, and stood, orienting herself toward home. The walk was automatic now, muscle memory guiding her through the streets she'd learned inch by inch over the past 6 months. Her studio apartment was small and spare, furnished with secondhand furniture she'd selected by feel and necessity rather than aesthetics. She didn't need much. A bed, a chair, a table, a kitchen just large enough to prepare simple meals. She'd learned to navigate the space perfectly, could move through it in complete darkness without hesitation, though the darkness made no difference to her. Sofia set her violin case down carefully, made herself a cup of tea, and sat at her small table with the business card in front of her. She ran her fingers over the embossed letters again, as if they could tell her something beyond the simple facts they communicated. Luca Andretti, Private Enterprises. She should say no. She knew she should say no. But in the morning, when she called the number on the card, she heard herself saying yes instead. The car that arrived to take Sofia to Pacific Heights was unlike any vehicle she'd ridden in before. She knew it was expensive from the sound of the door closing. A heavy, solid thunk that spoke of engineering and luxury, and from the quality of the leather seats. Butter soft under her hands as the driver helped her settle in. The driver himself was polite but minimal in his conversation, asking only if she was comfortable and if the temperature was acceptable before pulling away from the curb outside her apartment. Sofia sat with her violin case on her lap and tried to quiet the anxiety churning in her stomach. She'd agreed to this visit to familiarize herself with the space where she'd be performing. But now that she was actually on her way, the reality of what she'd committed to felt overwhelming. The drive took less than 15 minutes, though it felt longer. She tracked their progress by the turns and stops, by the changing quality of the street noise outside the car. They were climbing. She could feel the incline, the way the car's engine adjusted to the gradient. Pacific Heights, built on one of San Francisco's many hills, offered sweeping views that meant nothing to Sofia, but created a geography she could sense in other ways. When the car stopped, the driver came around to help her out, offering his arm with practiced courtesy. "We're here, Miss Martinez. The entrance is just ahead. Mr. Andretti is waiting for you." Sofia took the driver's arm, letting him guide her across what felt like smooth pavement, probably a driveway, and then up 3 shallow steps. She heard the sound of a door opening, and then Luca's voice, closer than she'd expected. "Sofia, thank you for coming." "Thank you for sending the car," she said, releasing the driver's arm and standing at what she hoped was an appropriate distance from Luca. "It made things much easier. Let me show you inside." She felt Luca's hand, gentle at her elbow, guiding her forward. "We'll be performing in the main salon. It's a large room, high ceilings, good acoustics. I think you'll find it suitable." They moved through what Sofia sensed was a grand entrance. Marble floors, from the way their footsteps echoed, an open space that created a particular quality of sound. She could smell furniture polish and fresh flowers, expensive perfumes of domesticity. The house felt enormous, the kind of space that could only exist at the intersection of generational wealth and contemporary power. "Here," Luca said, and Sofia heard a door opening. The acoustic quality shifted immediately. They'd entered a different room, one with hardwood floors and surfaces that would reflect sound differently than marble. "This is the salon." Sofia stood still, letting her other senses map the space. Large, as Luca had said. Windows on at least one wall. She could feel the way the air moved differently near glass. Furniture, but not so much that it would crowd the space or deaden the acoustics. And something else, a quality she couldn't name but recognized instinctively. This room had been designed for music. Someone had understood how sound moved through space and had created an environment that would honor it. "Can I explore?" she asked. "Love. Of course. Take as long as you need." Sofia set down her violin case and began walking the perimeter of the room, her hands outstretched, her cane tapping lightly against the floor. She counted her steps, noted the corners and walls, the placement of furniture. There was a piano, a grand piano, from the size and shape of it, near what she guessed was the center of one wall. Chairs arranged in a semicircle, probably for the guests who would attend the memorial. And, in front of the piano, a clear space where she could stand to perform. "The acoustics are beautiful," she said, her voice carrying in the space in a way that confirmed her assessment. "Who plays the piano?" "No one, anymore." Luca's voice came from somewhere behind her, near the door. "My mother played. It was hers." Sofia rested her hand on the piano's polished surface, feeling the grain of the wood beneath her fingertips. "She was the one who taught you to love music." "Yes, she was." Luca moved closer, his footsteps sure across the hardwood. "She sang, mostly. Opera, but also jazz standards, traditional Italian songs. The house was always full of music when I was growing up." "And now?" "Now it's quiet." There was something bleak in the way he said it, a loneliness that Sofia recognized. She'd lived in that same silence after her parents died, the absence of music like an amputation. "You could play it yourself," she said. "The piano, please. Even if it's not the same." "I don't play. I never learned. My mother tried to teach me, but I was impatient, wanted to be outside with my friends instead of practicing scales." Luca's voice held regret. "One of many things I'd do differently if I could." Sofia turned toward him, drawn by the emotion in his words. "You were a kid. Kids don't understand yet that time is finite, that the people we love won't always be there to teach us things." "No, they don't." Luca was quiet for a moment. "How old were you when your parents died?" 12. Car accident. I was in the back seat. They died at the scene, and I woke up 3 days later in the hospital with traumatic brain injuries that had destroyed my optic nerves. Sophia didn't usually share this much detail with strangers, but there was something about the quiet of this room, the shared understanding of loss, that made the words come more easily. I spent a long time being angry that I'd survived. It seemed unfair that I got to live when they didn't, especially when the life I was left with felt so much smaller than what I'd had before. But you found music. I found music, and it made the smaller life feel bigger again. Sophia turned back to the piano, running her hand along its edge. Your mother would want the house to be full of music again, not to replace what was lost, but to honor it. She heard Luca move closer, felt him stop just a few feet away. You're a very perceptive person, Sofia Martinez. Blind people get told that a lot, I think it's partly true and partly that we notice different things than sighted people do. We're not distracted by visual information, so we pick up on tone of voice, on the way people breathe, on the small sounds that reveal emotion. Sophia tilted her head, studying him through her other senses. You're nervous right now. About the memorial, probably. About whether it will be what you want it to be. Elf. Yes, Luca exhaled slowly. My mother was complicated. Beloved by many, feared by some. She lived in a world that required strength and discretion, and she taught me how to navigate that world. This memorial is for the people who loved her, but it's also a political event. In its way, I need it to be perfect. Political event. Sophia understood what he wasn't saying directly, that the guests would be assessing him, watching for weakness or uncertainty, measuring his capacity to hold power in the wake of his mother's death. The memorial was performance, in both the musical sense and the broader sense of public self-presentation. I can help with the musical part, she said. The rest is outside my expertise. The musical part is the most important part. Luca moved again, and Sophia heard a chair scraping against the floor. Aligned. Will you play something so I can hear how you sound in this space? Sophia retrieved her violin and positioned herself in the clear area near the piano. She considered what to play, what would suit this room and this moment, and settled on Bach. The Chaconne from Partita No. 2, a piece that was both technically demanding and emotionally devastating, a meditation on loss and the persistence of beauty in the face of grief. She played for 15 minutes, losing herself in the complexity of Bach's composition, in the way her violin sang in this perfectly designed space. When she finished, the silence that followed felt sacred, weighted with the kind of emotion that had no adequate words. That was extraordinary, Luca said quietly. You're far more skilled than I'd realized. Street performing doesn't showcase the full range, Sophia admitted. Most people don't want to hear Bach when they're walking to dinner. They want something light, familiar. But this is what you love to play. Yes. Looks? Then play it at the memorial. Play the Puccini because it was my mother's favorite, but also play this. Play the music that matters to you. Sophia lowered her violin, surprised by the suggestion. Are you sure? It's your mother's memorial. It should reflect her tastes, not mine. My mother believed that music was sacred, that it connected us to something larger than ourselves. She would want you to play what moves you, what demonstrates the full depth of what music can be. Luca stood, and Sophia heard him walking toward her. I want this memorial to be more than grief and obligation. I want it to be a celebration of everything she believed about beauty and art, and the importance of creating meaning in a world that often seems meaningless. The intensity in his voice caught Sophia off guard. She'd expected a certain formality from Luca Andretti, a carefully maintained distance appropriate to a business transaction. But there was nothing distant about the way he was speaking now, nothing transactional about the emotion in his words. All right, she said. I'll plan a program that includes both. The Puccini, some Bach, maybe some Vivaldi. About 45 minutes total? Perfect. Luca paused, and Sophia sensed him struggling with something he wanted to say but couldn't quite articulate. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. Fair enough. Another pause. Do you believe in fate? In the idea that certain people are meant to meet? Sophia considered the question seriously. I'm not sure. I think there are moments when the universe seems to be nudging us towards something, but I don't know if that's fate or just our need to find patterns in randomness. The night I heard you play, I wasn't supposed to be there. I was on my way to a meeting across town, but my driver took a wrong turn, and we ended up on your street. I could have just continued on, corrected course. But I heard your violin, and something made me tell the driver to stop. Luca's voice was reflective, almost wondering. And you were playing one of my mother's favorite pieces, not the Puccini, but Ennio Morricone, Cinema Paradiso. She used to play it on the piano and cry, every single time. Sofia felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Unlikely. Improbable. Luca moved closer still, and Sofia could feel his presence just a few feet away, the warmth of another person in the space that separated them. Or fate, depending on what you believe. I don't know what I believe, Sofia said honestly, but I'm glad your driver made that wrong turn. So am I. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Sofia couldn't name. It wasn't quite attraction, or not only attraction, though she couldn't deny that she was aware of Luca in a way that had nothing to do with sound or scent or any of her usual navigational senses. It was recognition, maybe. The sense that this person, this stranger with his grief and his dangerous life, and his mother's piano silent in a beautiful room, understood something essential about her. I should go, Sofia said, breaking the moment before it could become something neither of them was ready for. I have enough information about the space. I'll plan the program and send you a list of what I'll need. Music stand, specific lighting if that's possible, timing. Of course, whatever you need. Luca's professional distance had returned, his voice once again controlled and measured. I'll have my driver take you home. And Sofia? Thank you for agreeing to do this. It means more than you know. Sofia gathered her violin and let Luca guide her back through the enormous house to the entrance where the car waited. During the ride home, she sat in the leather seat and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Tried to understand why a simple house visit had felt so charged with significance. She was a street musician with a complicated past and a carefully circumscribed life. Luca Andretti was a crime boss with power and resources and enemies she couldn't even imagine. They should have nothing in common beyond a business transaction. Her music in exchange for his money. But in that salon, standing near his mother's silent piano, Sofia had felt something shift. A connection, fragile and new, built on shared grief and the recognition that both of them had learned to carry loss like a weight they couldn't put down. It was dangerous, probably. Getting close to Luca Andretti in any capacity was a risk she shouldn't take. But as Sofia let herself into her apartment and set down her violin case, she found herself already thinking about what she would wear to the memorial, about how she would play the Puccini to honor a woman she'd never met but felt she somehow understood. She was already thinking about seeing Luca Andretti again, even though seeing was the wrong word for what she would do. And she was already afraid of what that meant.